أعزائي المشاهدين، مرحبا بكم في تلفزيون دولة الكويت، حيث نلتقي اليوم مع معالي الأمين العام لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش، الذي يزور البلاد تزامنا مع مرور 61 عاما على انضمام دولة الكويت لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة. وفي هذا اللقاء سوف نسلط الضوء على عدة قضايا وملفات إقليمية ودولية. الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، نرحب بكم على أرض دولة الكويت التي تكن لمعاليكم كل التقدير والاحترام. وفي البداية نود أن نتعرف على الإطار العام الذي يمكن أن نضع في هذه الزيارة قيمته وتوقيته.
The most important objective of this visit is to pay my respects to the new Emir of Kuwait. Kuwait is a privileged partner of the United Nations. There is an exemplary cooperation between Kuwait and the United Nations, and I have a particular debt of gratitude towards Kuwait. When I was High Commissioner for Refugees, we were in deep trouble because we couldn't find the resources needed to support the Syrian refugees after the crisis in Syria. And it was His Highness the Emir of Kuwait that has accepted not only to organize 3 conferences in support to the Syrian refugees, but to make enormous donation in the beginning of the conference of $500 million to force all other countries to do the same, demonstrating what is the extraordinary generosity of Kuwait in relation to the humanitarian needs of populations everywhere. And then a second thing, I have an enormous admiration for the role that Kuwait plays, and which is part of our own role too, as a mediator, as a bridge builder, an honest broker. I remember when there was a crisis in the Gulf between Qatar and other countries, it was Kuwait that assumed the leadership of bringing them together. And in many other situations, I see always Kuwait as a symbol of generosity and wisdom. And so I thought on my way to the Arab League summit that I should come and pay my respects to the new Emir and tell him how much we cherish our cooperation with Kuwait and how much we want to see it strengthened and developed in all possible areas of the life of the UN.
على مدار عقود من الزمن شهدت العلاقة بين دولة الكويت والأمم المتحدة احتراما متبادلا ومواقف موحدة ورؤى مشتركة. كيف تثمنون هذه العلاقة التي تعززت عبر العديد من المواقف؟
Enormously. And Kuwait is not only important for us because of its generosity in humanitarian aid or because of its role of a bridge builder in the region. Kuwait has been extremely active in all UN activities. Your mission in New York is at the present moment very active in the preparation of the Summit of the Future, where we will try to approve a number of orientations for the reforms that are necessary in our multilateral system in order to respond to the huge challenges of today. So Kuwait is extremely engaged in the whole of the UN activities, and we value that engagement enormously. And we hope that this visit will contribute to make it even more effective in the future.
كيف تقدر المنظمة الدولية الأدوار التي تلعبها دولة الكويت سواء سياسياً بصفة عامة أو إنسانياً في مختلف هيئات الأمم المتحدة بصفة خاصة؟
I think that the fact that your Emir was appointed by my predecessor as a world humanitarian champion shows, and it was the only one appointed in the world, shows how much we appreciate the generosity of Kuwait humanitarian contributions to some of the most dramatic crises in the world. Just a few days ago, Kuwait announced a contribution of $30 million to UNRWA. UNRWA is the backbone of the international humanitarian support to the people in Gaza that is suffering enormously. But UNRWA was heavily under attack, as you know, and we have seen many countries reluctant to support UNRWA. If now they are basically coming back. But Kuwait immediately has shown an enormous generosity and has announced a very special contribution to UNRWA in these very difficult circumstances. This shows you how relevant, how up-to-date, how effective is the Kuwaiti humanitarian support.
غزة وصلت الآن إلى حافة الهاوية بين دمار شامل وأوضاع متدهورة تمثل وصمة عار على جبين الإنسانية. فما هي الأدوات التي تملكها الأمم المتحدة في مواصلة دورها لمعالجة هذه الأوضاع؟
Well, the situation in Gaza is intolerable. The level of destruction and the number of civilian victims is absolutely unprecedented. Let's make a comparison. The war in Ukraine. You have two very powerful armies, two of the most powerful armies in the world. You have heavy bombardments, including over civilian infrastructure. And in more than 2 years, there were much less civilian casualties in the war in Ukraine than the civilian casualties that have happened in about 6 months of the war in Gaza, which means that the level of civilian victims in Gaza is unprecedented, which means that there is something wrong with the way these military operations have been conducted. And so the ceasefire is absolutely crucial to end this carnage. And the ceasefire is absolutely crucial to create conditions for a solution to emerge. And there is only one possible solution. You have millions of Palestinians, you have millions of Israelis, you need to make them live in peace and security. The only way is with a two-state solution, is with the recognition of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and to a Palestinian state.
السيد الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، لديك العديد من المواقف المشرفة التي لاقت استحسانا دوليا كبيرا في التنديد بما يحدث في غزة. إلى أي مدى ترى تأثير هذه المواقف على تغيير نظرة بعض الدول إلى القضية الفلسطينية؟
Well, I hope that the fact that we have consistently abided by principles, the Charter, international law, international humanitarian law, I hope that this is progressively making people understand all over the world that this is not a question of political option in favor of this or in favor of that. This is a question of respect to the fundamental principles in which the world order is based. And I believe that progressively there has been a movement of public opinions all over the world, even in countries that are very supportive of Israel, in relation to the need to stop this war and in the need to respect and understand the rights of the Palestinian people to have their own state.
تواجه الأمم المتحدة تحديات صعبة اتسعت مجالاتها خارج نطاق الأمن والسلم إلى الكوارث الطبيعية وقضايا مناخية وصحية وقضايا الفقر. فما هي أولويات الأمم المتحدة في هذه المرحلة؟
Well, these three things are absolute priorities for us. First, climate change.
Yeah.
We are seeing floods, even Dubai had floods. I just came from Nairobi. The floods in Kenya were terrible. In Brazil, the floods were terrible. We are seeing a multiplication of incidents, storms of all kinds, hurricanes, and they are becoming more and more frequent, more and more devastating, with more and more terrible humanitarian consequences. And then we see heat waves and people dying because of heat waves in different parts of the world. But I think for Kuwait this is very important because even before climate change, you already had a very heat summer. So we are seeing the seawater rise and what this represents as a threat to coastal communities all over the world. So climate change is indeed the defining issue of our time, the major threat to the survival of humankind, and it is for us an absolute priority. But then inequality. Inequalities in the world are appalling. Developing countries, many of them are drowning in debt. They have no resources to respond to the most basic needs of their populations. Many countries in Africa are paying more in interest rates of the loans they have to contract after the COVID than in education or health. And we have an international financial architecture that is outdated, that is dysfunctional, that is unfair, that corresponds to the world after the Second World War. The world in which many of the countries that today exist were not even independent. So we need deep reforms in the international financial architecture, and we need a strong support to developing countries to correct these inequalities and to fight effectively poverty and hunger. And then, as you rightly mentioned, we had the COVID, and the world did not answer effectively to the COVID. So we need to prepare for the next one. That is the reason why we are presenting in the preparation of the Summit of the Future the idea of a system of emergency platforms that are prepared for the emergence of devastating global situations like a new pandemic.
الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، كلمة أخيرة تود توجيهها.
I want to express to the Kuwaiti people my deep friendship and solidarity, and to say that for the United Nations, the importance of Kuwait is not proportional to its size. It's proportional to the heart of the Kuwaitis, to the generosity of the Kuwaitis, and to the very important role Kuwait plays in order to guarantee peace in the region and further afield.
وفي ختام اللقاء لا يسعنا إلا أن نشكر ضيفنا الكريم معالي الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش. نشكر لكم متابعتكم وإلى اللقاء.